Do you know how I was born? Same as you. Anyway, the story is waiting for you.
I don't make threats. I make promises, and I always keep them. Hi, my name is Mary Ellison. I'm 35, and I run a structural contracting company in Houston, Texas. I build steel and concrete for a living, massive frameworks that hold up skyscrapers, bridges, and warehouses against the relentless Gulf Coast winds and floods. But the thing I'm proudest of building is the day I legally tore my family's entire financial world down, brick by brick, and walked away without looking back. They thought I'd always be their ATM with feelings. They thought there would be no consequences to cutting me out of their will after draining me for years. They were wrong. Before I take you back to where it all started, if you've ever been used by your own family, hit subscribe because betrayal might be written in ink, but revenge is carved into the court record. This isn't just a story of family drama. It's a blueprint for reclaiming what's yours. When the people who should protect you turn into parasites, it's about the slow burn of realization, the cold precision of planning, and the satisfying thud of justice landing like a sledgehammer on rotten foundations. Let me paint the picture of my childhood, because that's where the cracks first appeared. I grew up in a dusty cul-de-sac on the west side of Houston, in a neighborhood called Spring Branch. The streets were lined with modest brick houses, the kind built in the 1970s, with low-pitched roofs and chain-link fences. Our yard had overgrown crepe myrtles that bloomed pink in the summer, dropping petals like confetti on the cracked driveway. There was a basketball hoop out front, permanently leaning to one side from years of Jason, slamming dunks and me quietly shooting free throws when no one was watching. From the outside, we looked like any other middle-class family, functional, unremarkable. But inside, everything orbited around one person, and it wasn't me. My younger brother, Jason, was the headline act in the Ellison family circus. Born 3 years after me, he came into the world with a charisma that sucked up all the oxygen. From the moment he could walk, he was the center of attention, charming relatives with his gap-toothed grin, turning every family gathering into a stage for his antics. He's so talented. My mom would gush to aunts and uncles over potluck dinners. He just needs a little direction. Dad would nod along, slapping Jason on the back like he'd just won the Super Bowl. "He's our big dreamer," he'd say, as if dreaming was a rare gift bestowed only on the chosen. Me? I was the good kid, the checklist child, the reliable one who faded into the background like wallpaper in a rented apartment. Honor roll every semester? That was me, studying under the dim light of my desk lamp while Jason blasted video games in the next room. Chores done without being asked? Me again, scrubbing the kitchen counters after dinner or mowing the lawn on humid. Saturday mornings, quiet, easy, low maintenance? Absolutely. I learned early that making noise meant drawing attention away from Jason, and that was an unspoken sin in our house. Attention clung to him like the thick humidity in August, wrapping around him and leaving everyone else parched. I can still picture our living room, faded floral couch, a coffee table scarred from years of Jason's toy cars, and my forgotten homework. The TV was always tuned to whatever Jason wanted. Cartoons, sports, action movies. My parents, Tom and Linda Ellison, weren't bad people in the conventional sense. Dad worked as a mechanic at a local auto shop, coming home with grease-stained hands and stories about finicky engines. Mom was a part-time bookkeeper for a small accounting firm, juggling spreadsheets and PTA meetings. They loved us both, I think, but love in our family was measured in uneven portions. Jason got the feast. I got the scraps. One memory stands out like a splinter under my skin, my high school graduation. It was June 2008, the air thick with the scent of freshly cut grass and impending freedom. I was valedictorian at Westside High School, a title I'd earned through countless all-nighters and sacrifices. I'd worked every weekend during junior and senior year at a hardware store called Handy Hardware, stocking shelves with nails, screws, and power tools while sneaking glances at my textbooks behind the counter. The job paid minimum wage, but it taught me the basics of construction. Supplies, knowledge that would later become my lifeline. The ceremony was held in the school auditorium, packed with proud parents and fidgety siblings. I stood on stage in my cap and gown, heart pounding as I delivered my speech about perseverance and building your own future. I quoted Maya Angelou and talked about how challenges shape us like steel in a forge. Teachers wiped tears. Classmates applauded. It was my moment, or so I thought. Afterward, we went to Chili's for a celebratory dinner. Me, Mom, Dad, and Jason. The restaurant buzzed with families like ours, clinking glasses and sharing laughs. My parents handed me a $50 Visa gift card wrapped in a generic Hallmark envelope. "We're proud of you, kiddo," Dad said, patting my hand. "We knew you'd be fine." Mom smiled and added, "You've always been so capable." That was it. No party, no extravagant gift, no outpouring of emotion. Just a pat on the back and back to normal. 2 weeks later, Jason scored the winning touchdown in a local summer league football game. He was 15, gangly but athletic, and the play was nothing special, a lucky breakaway run. But you'd think he'd just led the Texans to a championship. The backyard exploded into a celebration. Relatives crammed onto our patchy lawn, a rented bounce house for the kids, BBQ smoke curling from Dad's grill, and in the center of it all, Jason unwrapping a brand new gaming PC complete with a high-end graphics card. The total cost? Easily over 1,000, laughter echoed. Toasts were made, and Jason basked in the glow. The money didn't bother me as much as the enthusiasm. For my achievement, it was a quiet, "That's nice." For Jason's, it was, "This is incredible." That pattern repeated like a faulty blueprint. When I got accepted to UT Austin on a partial scholarship for engineering, Dad glanced at the letter and said, "You'll figure the rest out. You're resourceful." Mom hugged me briefly and went back to folding laundry. But when Jason, with his mediocre grades and spotty attendance, got into a private college in Dallas, a school known more for its parties than its academics, they didn't hesitate. They signed the loans, packed his bags, and waved him off like he was heading to Harvard. College was my first real taste of the difference between help and being truly on your own. UT Austin's campus was a sprawling maze of red brick buildings and live oaks, alive with the energy of 50,000 students chasing dreams. I majored in civil engineering with a minor in business, drawn to the logic of structures, beams, loads, stresses. That made sense when human. Relationships didn't. Numbers didn't play favorites. Concrete didn't lie. But tuition, even with the scholarship, was a beast. I pieced together my schedule like a jigsaw. Puzzle. Mornings at a supply warehouse loading trucks with rebar and lumber. Afternoons in lectures on statics and dynamics. Evenings tutoring calculus to freshmen for $15 an hour. And weekends apprenticing for a general contractor on residential builds. By 21, I could read blueprints like a novel, estimate materials down to the last bolt, negotiate with suppliers for bulk discounts, and pour concrete slabs in the blistering Texas heat without passing out. My hands calloused, my muscles toned from hauling bags of cement. I lived in a cramped dorm room with 3 roommates, surviving on ramen noodles and instant coffee. Social life? Non-existent. While my peers partied on 6th Street, I was buried in textbooks or crashing on a lumpy futon after a 12-hour shift. Jason's college experience? A different world. He majored in entrepreneurship, which seemed to involve more keg stands than case studies. His updates came via family group texts, photos of him at frat parties, vague mentions of investments in crypto or apps that never materialized. Money flowed to him like the Brazos River after a storm, tuition paid, rent covered, an allowance for essentials that included concert tickets and designer sneakers. One winter break, over a tense Christmas dinner with dry turkey and awkward silence, I finally asked why. Why is everything for Jason paid for while I'm scraping by? Dad didn't look up from his plate. "Because you can," he said, fork midway to his mouth. "You're tough." "He's not built like you," Mom chimed in. "You've always been independent." "Mary, it's a good thing." In their mouths, independent didn't mean strong or capable. It meant, we don't owe you anything. It meant I was the safety net, not the one who needed catching. That conversation lingered like a bad smell. But I pushed it down, focusing on graduation. In 2012, I walked across the stage at Darrell K. Royal Stadium, diploma in hand, ready to build my future. Jason dropped out that same year, citing creative differences with his professors, and moved back home to figure things out. Post-college, I landed a job at a mid-sized construction company in Houston, overseeing structural projects for commercial buildings. The office was in a bland industrial park off I-10, with fluorescent lights and the constant hum of printers. I started as a junior engineer, crunching numbers on load-bearing walls and seismic retrofits. But ambition burned in me like acetylene torch. After 2 years, I quit to start my own firm, Ellison Structural Contracting. My first office was a half-finished corner in a warehouse behind a mechanic's shop in Katy. The ceiling leaked during rainstorms. The AC unit rattled like a dying engine, and for 6 months, I slept on a camping mattress amid stacks of blueprints and empty takeout containers. Those early days were a grind. I filled out permits at midnight under a single bulb, learned bookkeeping from free YouTube tutorials, begged suppliers for 30-day credit terms, and showed up on job sites at dawn, hard hat in hand, pretending I wasn't terrified of failure. My first contract was a small warehouse addition, nothing glamorous, but it paid the bills. Slowly, word spread. I hired my first employee, a grizzled foreman named Raul, who taught me the nuances of rebar placement and crane operations. Every penny earned went back into the company, new tools, liability insurance, payroll for a growing crew. I lived frugally, rice, eggs, and black coffee from a thermos. While friends posted beach selfies from Cancun, I was knee-deep in mud overseeing foundation pours. And through it all, the family calls came. When Dad had a heart attack in 2015, I was on a job site in Galveston when Mom's frantic call came. He'd collapsed at work, clutching his chest. I dropped everything, drove to Memorial Hermann Hospital, and wired $27,000 from my business account to cover the deductibles and rehab. When a hailstorm tore through their roof the following year, golf ball-sized ice pummeling the shingles, I paid $9,200 to a roofing company I knew, even throwing in free labor from my crew. When they wanted a kitchen remodel, new granite counters, stainless appliances, I got them contractor pricing and oversaw the install myself. Jason, meanwhile, bounced from one failed venture to another. First, a startup selling custom t-shirts online that folded after 6 months. Then, a podcast about motivational mindset that never gained traction. Then, an import business dealing in cheap electronics from China, which ended in a warehouse full of unsold gadgets. Each collapse was cushioned by home equity lines of credit, HELOCs, and maxed out credit cards in my parents' names. When the payments piled up, the phone rang. "Just until we catch up," Mom would say, voice trembling. I sent transfers, $400 here, $900 there, $2,500 for emergencies. Eventually, I set up an automatic $3,000 monthly transfer from my business account. No contract, no repayment plan. Just obligation wrapped in the guise of family love. I believed, stupidly, naively, that one day it would balance out. Maybe in their will, they had acknowledged the weight I'd carried. That illusion shattered in a beige conference room downtown, in the offices of a estate planning attorney named Mr. Hargrove. It was a humid afternoon in 2022, the kind where your shirt sticks to your back the moment you step outside. My parents had called a family meeting to discuss the future. Jason was there, slouched in a chair with his phone in hand, scrolling through social media. Mr. Hargrove, a balding man in an ill-fitting suit, cleared his throat and read from the documents. The entirety of the estate, house, savings, investments, will go to Jason Ellison. I blinked, sure I'd misheard. Me? I'd received Grandma's old jewelry, box and a lump sum of $25,000, that was it. Then came the bombshell, the mortgage. The house, paid off years ago through Dad's overtime and Mom's scrimping, now had a HELOC, balance of $312,000. My parents avoided my eyes, staring at the carpet like it held answers. They'd refinanced to fund Jason's latest flop, a bar in Midtown called Jason's Joint, and used my monthly $3,000 to service the loan. All those stories about taxes, medical bills, emergencies. Lies. Jason shrugged, not even bothering to look guilty. "It's not like you're broke, Mary. You've got your company." Something cold settled in my chest, like concrete hardening in winter. My illusions cracked clean through. I stood up, legs steady despite the rage boiling inside, and walked out without a word. The drive back to my office was a blur of traffic on I-610, horns blaring, but I heard nothing but the echo of betrayal. Back at Ellison Structural, now a proper office in a converted warehouse with air conditioning that worked, and a team of 15, I sat at my desk, staring at the screen. The space was functional, metal desks, filing cabinets overflowing with contracts, walls pinned with blueprints of ongoing projects, a high-rise in downtown Houston, a bridge retrofit over Buffalo Bayou, but that day, work waited. I canceled the monthly transfer with a few clicks, revoked their access to my personal accounts, and closed the joint credit card we'd opened years ago for family emergencies. Then I opened a new spreadsheet, Ellison Family Subsidies, facts, not feelings. I listed every transaction I could recall, pulling bank statements and emails. Dad's hospital bills, $27,846 roof. Repair, $9,200 new. AC unit after a compressor failure. $5,600 Jason's startup loan that was never repaid. $4,000 credit. Card payoff for Mom's shopping therapy. $6,300 the monthly transfers over 4 years. $44,000 miscellaneous car repairs, vacations they deserved. Jason's bail after a DUI. Another $96,3777 total. $206,583.77. It wasn't just money. It was years of my life. poured into their black hole. I printed it out, the paper warm from the printer, and stared at the numbers. They didn't lie. People did. That's when I called Andrea Santos, a lawyer I'd met through a networking event for women in construction. Her office was in a sleek high-rise on Allen Parkway, with views of the city skyline. Andrea was sharp, mid-40s, no-nonsense bob haircut, eyes that could spot a lie from across the room. I laid out the spreadsheet, the will details, the HELOC revelation. "What do you want, Mary?" she asked, leaning back in her leather chair. "I want to cut all financial ties," I said, voice steady. "Create a legal record of everything I've paid, and make them feel consequences for once." Andrea nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "All right, let's build your case." We started with discovery. Andrea subpoenaed the mortgage files from the bank. What we found was a goldmine of misconduct. The application listed inflated income, dad's mechanic salary, padded with fictitious overtime. Mom's part-time gig turned full-time on paper. Worse, there were notes in the underwriter's comments. Borrowers indicate reliable financial assistance from daughter's business. Income, my monthly transfers, had been factored into their qualification, presented as guaranteed support. It bordered on fraud. Next, Jason's bar records. Jason's joint was a dive in Midtown, with neon signs and sticky floors, catering to after-work crowds. But the books were a mess. Missing receipts, unreported cash income from happy hours, employees paid under the table to avoid taxes. Enough red flags to wave at the IRS. Andrea compiled it all into a lawsuit. Claims for unjust enrichment, they'd benefited from my money without repayment. Fraud, the lies about where my transfers went. And conversion, using my funds for unauthorized purposes. We didn't stop there. Andrea sent a detailed packet to the bank's fraud department, highlighting the misrepresentations. Copies went to the Harris County District Attorney and the IRS Audit Division. Then we waited. It was like setting rebar in a foundation, patient, precise, knowing the structure would hold when the pour came. The panic set in quickly. My parents showed up at my office unannounced. Mom's eyes red from crying. Dad looking older than his 62 years. "How could you do this to us, Mary?" Mom wailed, clutching a tissue. "We're family." Dad tried anger, ungrateful. "After everything we've done for you." I recorded the conversation on my phone, calmly directing them to speak with Andrea. They left voicemails that night, guilt trips about my childhood, shame tactics about airing dirty laundry, manipulations like, "Jason needs us now more than ever." I saved everyone, forwarding them to Andrea. When the subpoenas for their emails and financial records arrived, the dam broke. The messages were damning. "Don't tell Mary about the bar. Loan, she'll freak. We just need the $3K to keep coming until the bar turns. Profit. Be practical about which kid needs the security. Mary's got her own thing going." They told on themselves in black and white. Andrea filed motions to freeze their assets pending the lawsuit, preventing any quick sales or transfers. The court date arrived in the Harris County Civil Courthouse, a monolithic building downtown with echoing halls and stern bailiffs. Judge Ramirez, a no-frills veteran with a thick mustache, reviewed the evidence. "This is ugly," he said from the bench, peering over his glasses. "Family disputes like this tear people apart, and it's going to get uglier before it gets better." He allowed the case to proceed, granting a temporary injunction on the house sale. Ugly it got. The IRS launched an audit, uncovering unpaid taxes on Jason's bar income, thousands in back owed, plus penalties. The DA charged Jason with tax evasion and wire fraud for falsifying loan applications using my parents' info. The bank, smelling liability, initiated foreclosure proceedings on the house, citing the fraudulent application. My parents' panic turned to desperation. They called daily, begging me to resume payments, to make this go away. "We'll change the will," Mom promised through tears. "Just help us one more time." I refused. For the first time, I let them feel the weight of their choices. The house, that dusty cul-de-sac home with the leaning basketball hoop, went to auction. Bidders gathered on the lawn, a realtor's sign staked in the grass. It sold for $280,000, barely covering the HELOC after fees. Jason's bar shuttered, locks changed by the landlord for unpaid rent. He took a plea deal. 18 months in federal prison for the fraud charges, served at a minimum security facility in Bastrop. In mediation, with Andrea by my side, my parents amended the will to include me equally. They signed a written admission. We acknowledge Mary's financial contributions totaling over $200,000 and regret using her as a resource without reciprocity. A portion of the house sale proceeds, $50,000, went to me as partial repayment. I dropped the lawsuit once the terms were met, but the damage was done. Dad's handwritten letter arrived months later, postmarked from their new apartment, a cramped 2-bedroom, in a subsidized complex off Westheimer. "We used you, Mary," it read in shaky script. "We favored Jason because he was weak, and we mistook your strength for permission to take advantage. We're sorry. I didn't forgive them, not fully. Forgiveness isn't a switch you flip. But I acknowledge the honesty, filing the letter away like a closed contract. Today, we're civil but distant. I see them twice a year, Thanksgiving at a neutral restaurant, Christmas cards in the mail. I don't fund anything. I don't enable anything. Ellison Structural thrives. Multi-million-dollar contracts, a fleet of trucks, employees who respect me. I've built something solid, unshakable. If you're still reading, maybe you've been the strong one too. The dependable sibling, the reliable child, the one everyone assumes will figure it out. Hear this. Strength isn't a punishment. Being independent doesn't mean you owe the world your everything. Saying no isn't betrayal, it's self-preservation. My revenge wasn't loud explosions or dramatic confrontations. It was paperwork, lawyers, boundaries, and finally choosing myself over the family myth. I didn't send them to prison or ruin their lives. Their choices did that. I just stopped cushioning the fall. I'm Mary Ellison from Houston. I don't make threats. I make promises. And I kept this one.